Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. As you guys can see from the video, today we are back with another video talking about Arcane. And as you can see from the title, today we are going to be having the conversation that I've kind of been dreading. But I thought, you know what, let me give my thoughts on it. And the TikTok peeps said that they wanted to see this too. So we're going to be having the conversation about Arcane. It's alleged centrism, people thinking that it's centrist. We're just basically going to be having a conversation about that. I'm going to give my thoughts, give my little 2 cents. You lot can give your thoughts and your 2 cents in the comments below and everything. And we'll just have a conversation. And I just want to make a disclaimer now, guys. This video is not going to be on the vibe of the last one, yeah? Because in the last video, I'm not gonna lie, I got a little bit rude, I got a little bit mean because I was getting heated, but I'm not gonna be on that vibe for this video, okay? I want it to be like an actual, I want it to be like an actual civil conversation, yeah? Let's not get mean, let's be nice to each other, guys. Yeah, let's just not do too much, just have civil conversation, that's it. So yeah, but before we get into the video, make sure you like the video if you enjoyed today's video. Subscribe, turn on your post notifications as well if you want to keep up with me, you don't want to miss a post, all of that good stuff. And yeah, we're just gonna get straight into it. So the first thing that I want to talk about, or I guess the first segment for this video that I'm going to do, is going to be about why people think Arcane is centrist. So the reason why people seem to think that Arcane is centrist is mainly due to the ending. So I've seen most people say that they don't like the ending, or they think the ending is pushing centrism, or is basically a example of centrism, because they feel that Zorn joining in to fight against Ambessa and Victor and help destroy the Arcane, they think that happening and them, basically setting aside their differences to help Piltover, even though I personally think that that's kind of an inaccurate way to present that information, but I will get into that later. People seem to think that that is basically just the writers pushing or dashing the issues to the side, Zorn and Piltover being at odds. They basically just dash that to the side so that they can fight this bigger evil. And then after, they all kind of just join hands, and Savika's put on the council and da. So it's basically just like trying to say that, we can set aside our differences and, try to enact change within the system and all of that stuff. So that's why people seem to think they're centrist. So now we're going to get into my first thoughts. So first, to address the ending and people's thoughts on the ending. Now, personally, for me, I didn't interpret the ending the way these people interpreted it. And I just want to make it clear as well, I am not one of those people who hates or thinks you're a dummy if you interpreted or have this opinion, right? If you interpreted the ending that way, I think it's a reasonable interpretation, right? I don't think it's far-fetched to have that opinion, because yes, you can interpret it that way. I'm not I'm just not a tyrant. I'm not one of these people who's you can't talk bad about Arcane, you can't say anything wrong about it, nothing like that. I'm not one of those people, but I do think that when it comes to people who interpret the ending that way, I think, yes, it is reasonable to interpret it that way, but I think the way in which some of these people frame the ending is a bit disingenuous. And I actually had kind of a back and forth with someone on my TikTok yesterday about this, or well, depending when I'm gonna put this video out, it will probably be 2 or 3 days after. But the day I'm filming this, it was yesterday. But I basically had a back and forth with this person about this same issue, and they seem to also feel that the ending, was pushing centrism. And they basically parroted the same sentiment of, them both fighting against the same evil. It's basically just the writers choosing to throw away their differences. And I personally think that's a disingenuous way to frame the ending, because first off, we see the people of Piltover, right, trying to, or I can't remember if it was Caitlyn, or I don't know, they try to convince some people in Zorn, or they try to convince Zorn to help them fight against Ambessa and in the war. They basically try to convince them, and a lot of them say no. Some of them say yes, a lot of them say no. It's only until Piltover starts losing the battle against Ambessa where now Zorn, like they all the people, the rest of the people from Zorn, they come along and start fighting too. And the reason why I think that it's disingenuous to frame it as just, oh, they just join hands and fight against the same evil is because that's just not what happened. That's not what happened, because let's be real, Ambessa's and Victor's plan, it was going to it was going to end the world, literally. And the thing is as well, we literally see this in the alternate universe that Jace is transported to. We literally see what happens if Victor is successful. Everybody dies, literally everyone, including people from Piltover and people from Zorn. So to frame it as just Zorn is trying to help Piltover, they're like, yes, maybe to a certain extent, yes, they're trying to help them, but also they are fighting for themselves too. Like, they will die if they don't defeat him. So I'm just confused why people try to frame it as just this certain way. It's like, oh, they just decided to help Piltover. It's like, no, they were gonna die. Like, they were literally gonna die and Piltover was losing. I don't know. I feel like it's a disingenuous way to frame that ending. Like, they did that because they didn't want to also die. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's obvious. Like, it wasn't just them trying to, do kumbaya. Like, if they didn't come, everyone would have been dead. Like, I don't know. But yeah, that's why I think framing it that way is disingenuous. And people also say, well, they feel this way because there was all knights who put on the enforcer uniform and they also died in the enforcer uniform. And while I can understand why that might put a bad taste in your mouth to have some Zornites decide to wear the uniform and then they die in the uniform, I feel like also to frame that and say that that is the writers trying to push centrist ideas, you would also have to ignore the fact that there were so many Zornites who decided to turn their back. They didn't want to help Piltover. They literally were like, "Bun you guys, we don't care." Like, do you know what I mean? And I just feel like, personally, why would the writers show that if they're trying to portray a story of people who are able to set aside their differences and fight against the bigger evil? I don't know. I feel like they wouldn't really need to add that if that's what they were trying to go for. They would just have all the Zornites immediately say yes and help, and they will both fight alongside each other. And it's like, even then, even with the ending, right, to a certain extent, yes, you can interpret it as, oh, they're fighting alongside each other, but like, to ignore the fact that they were literally, everybody was basically fighting for their life. Nobody was doing this war because they wanted to, because it was fun. Everyone was literally fighting to save their life, to save the world. I don't know. I don't feel like I need to explain this. Like, we see it in the show. We just see it in the show. So I think to frame it this way it's interesting, and I just don't agree with it. I don't agree with it. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that. So now the next thing that I want to talk about, the next segment of this video that I want to talk about, is, I guess, just how people view Arcane, and specifically people who view Arcane within a political lens. So if you watch my TikToks, or if you follow me on TikTok, I have made multiple TikToks, or I've at least said it in multiple of my TikToks, right? I don't personally agree with people. Like, there's a demographic of people who seem to think that Arcane is a political show, in like the way in which they think the show is a political show is not the same way that I think Arcane is a political show, right? There are genuinely people who like use the show as like, what's the word? They kind of use it as like a litmus test for like people's leftism or like their IRL politics. And while I think that yes, it's important that people understand the political like nature or political properties of Arcane, because it's important to the storyline, I also think trying to frame the show as like, you know, if you agree with Zornites, then you know you're a good leftist. And if you if you don't, or you find any sort of sympathy with the Piltover character, then you know you're like a bootlicker, like you're fascist.
Don't laugh. You can't laugh.
And I'm saying this, I'm not even saying this with sarcasm, because that's genuinely like, this is the type of sentiment that I've seen in the fandom. People will genuinely say this. And this is my problem, because this is a main issue that like goes into this conversation, right? And why I just don't like this conversation. Because there are so many people who watch Arcane, right? And it's mainly, I've seen this a lot on Twitter. A lot of people on like Arcane Twitter, Arcane social media, they very much have this politic that they view the show in, and also how they navigate in the fandom because of that. There are people who genuinely think that Piltover equals bad and Zorn equals good. And I've said this from the beginning, right? Arcane is a very nuanced show with very nuanced characters. Like, it just doesn't work to try and put them into categories of who's categorically bad and who's categorically good. There are only like a few people who are outwardly like antagonists, right? Who you can say are just categorically bad, like, you know, an Ambessa or like a Silco. But like, people will try and do that same shit with like the main characters, and it's just it makes my head hurt. It makes my head hurt because it's just like, you are blatantly disregarding like the writing. Like, you're blatantly disregarding the writing of these characters, and you are purposely removing the nuance of these people just because you don't like their character, or because you think that this is the most leftist or like progressive way to view the show. And it's just like, just because you're trying to view the show through this progressive or leftist lens doesn't mean that you have correct interpretations or analysis. And actually, I would argue that a lot of you man who do that, you have a lot of bad analysis. And Arcane Twitter is a great example of it. Like, a lot of these big Arcane accounts, specifically these like big Jinx accounts on Twitter, some of you lot, like, you operate from this type of lens, right, when you watch the show, and some of your takes are atrocious. Like, I'm sorry, your takes are atrocious, and you do it under the guise of like, oh no, I'm just like, this is just the politically what's correct, right? My interpretation of this person, right? That they just don't align with my politics. That's right. That's why I have this opinion. That's why I remove Mel and Caitlyn of any sort of nuance, because you know they're from Piltover, and they're from a place where they do oppression, where they're oppressing people. So I just cannot categorically ever apply any sort of nuance or try to understand their characters or arcs. They're just bad. They're bad. Bad apples. Like, do you know what I mean? And it's just like, I feel like to do that is just such a lousy way of watching the show. That I've said this anyways, like, the people in the fandom who are like Zorn fans only or whatever, like, I just feel like you must have been so frustrated and so bored like watching this show, because the way in which you're watching the show is just completely illogical. Like, guys, I swear I'm not trying to get mean or rude in this video, yeah, but I just don't think it's not a good way to consume this show. It's not a good way to like, it's not a good lens to watch this show through, to just think, yeah, I'm only rooting for the people from Zone, everybody else, fuck you. Like, I just feel like that's what's going on. And it's like, a lot of people who parrot this sentiment, oh, the Arcane is centrist, this show is centrist, the writers are centrist. Like, this is how you're viewing the show, right? Because the show is giving characters who are from Piltover, or we see perspectives of people who do terrible things, like for example Marcus, because there was literally discourse, I made a TikTok about this, there was discourse on the TL not too long ago, maybe like 2 days ago, where Amanda Overton, like, she made a tweet a few years ago, like back in 2021, and someone was asking her about like Silco, Marcus's POV on why he took Vi and put her in jail after she had abandoned Powder, and then Silco got to her. And she was basically just explaining that in Marcus's head, he thought he was doing the right thing. He thought he was being a hero because otherwise, if he had let Vi go after Powder, they probably would have both died. So he felt like in his head he was doing the right thing. That is what Amanda was explaining. But for some reason, people interpreted this as Amanda herself trying to say, yes, this is my personal politic. This is how I personally see his actions, and I'm co-signing his actions. That is how they viewed it. And I feel like that tweet, that whole discourse was a great encapsulation and like a snapshot of like the logic and like pathology of these people who think that the show is centrist. I think a lot of you genuinely think that because the show is choosing to show perspectives that are outside of the Zornite perspective or perspectives of people like Jinx and Vi, you think that the show is trying to push centrism. Because we see Caitlyn's POV, we see her descent into rage and hatred. Because we see that, and we see the show through people like Jace's and Mel's perspective also, they think that the show is pushing centrism. And I just don't think that that makes any sense. I don't think that makes sense because why wouldn't you, in a show that is character based, why would you not give like perspective to these characters? Why would we not see their perspectives? Can you imagine if we watched this show and we were only seeing the perspective of like somebody like Jinx? Like, do you know what I mean? And the thing is as well, that's even funny about that, there are people who still like they still run with this narrative, right? Because they even like, you consumed the show through this particular character's narrative. That is why there are so many people who are Jinx fans who think that Vi is a terrible sister, because you think that Jinx is the most reliable narrator in the show simply because she's from Zornite, because she's a Zornite or she's from Zorn, and that she was oppressed. Like, you trust her to be the person who has the best perspective on things that are happening in the show, which is why you have these dog shit opinions. Like, do you get what I mean? And it's like, you like, there's no reflection, and you don't try to look within. And it's weird because these people are so firm in the way they view the show and think about the show, so they just find fault with anything like that they don't like. They will blame it on everybody else. It can never be just you personally. This isn't for me. This isn't for me, and that's why I don't like it. No, it's bad writing. It's bad writing, right? It's bad writing that this show didn't go the way I wanted it to. So it's the writers' fault. The writers are the ones in the wrong. The writers are the dummies, not me. Like, I just feel like it's so, I don't know how to explain it. And it's these people who like operate from this type of lens, they get so vitriolic when they encounter people who do not view the show through the same lens that they do, and it's very scary. Like, why are you getting your panties in a bunch? Like, why are you getting red in the face because of like a cartoon? Like, it's just very strange. But yeah, they will get their panties in a bunch over this cartoon, and it's because you decided to view it through this completely unrealistic lens. Like, it's just not the way in which the writers would have intended for people to watch the show through. I don't think that the writers are all were expecting people to watch the show or consume it this way, because I just think doing that is just completely stripping the show of any sort of nuance it is. Like, this is the thing as well, why I have a problem with people who say that Arcane is a political, is like, as a leftist show. There's nothing in that show that outwardly would like make it leftist. And this is the thing as well. I think a lot of you got enthralled in the fact that, there's this backstory of the show with, the people from this poor city and, the privileged people. You got like entrenched in that storyline, and like, you just took it and completely ran with it. You completely ran with it to the point that you forgot that it's supposed to be like the backstory. It's not actually the story itself. It just leaves me speechless, because I'm just like, I don't know how you so severely choose to completely like flip the show on its head. Because that's just not what it is. That's not what it is. I feel like an angel loses his wings every time that like an Arcane fan tries to reduce the show to Zorn versus Piltover. That's how I feel. I feel like an angel loses its wings every time someone does that. Really, like really, you like all of that content, all of that nuance, so much dimensions to this story, and all that you got from it, all that you care about, is Zorn versus Piltover. like I just like, to me it's just disappointing. It's disappointing. Like, imagine taking so many years, right, creating these characters, trying to build so much, backstory and depth and nuance to these characters, and giving us proper insight to these people, and giving us the chance to put ourselves in these characters' shoes, and these people just choose not to. They don't do that at all, and then they completely just skew the narrative and the intentions that you had when writing this show. Like, it is baffling. Like, it's truly baffling, and I feel bad. I just feel bad for, like, the people who wrote the show. Like, I feel bad for the people who created this idea, because can you imagine? That's what they're doing to your show. That's what they're doing to your baby. This is part of the reason as well why I think people have this opinion. A lot of people just view the show through this lens of Zorn good, Piltover bad, even though like, literally in both cities there are characters who are not just, they're not just, you can't just categorically say, yeah, this person is good because they're from this oppressed place. And I actually said this in one of my TikToks as well, but I have always found it weird how, specifically with Mel and Caitlin, the women of color in these shows, right, how they are just, the conversation about them in general, how it's gone, how they've been done by this fandom. I find it very interesting, because when it comes to characters like Jinx or even a Silco, people can put themselves in their shoes, understand where they're coming from. They have this dissertation level analysis on these characters, and I agree, these characters are extremely nuanced. But why do you actively deny that, like, these two other characters, Mel and Caitlin, aren't also extremely nuanced when they are? Like, I just feel like to actively deny that because they're from Piltover, and Piltover is like a oppressive city. Like, I just like, I don't know, man. It's just an issue that irritates me very much. There are just a lot of people who have viewed this show through this very strange, like, political lens, and they almost use it as a litmus test against other people to be like, yeah, if you like characters like Caitlyn, or you like Mel, or you can understand, like, their pathology or anything, yeah, like, you must just have, like, terrible politics, like, you must be, like, alt-right or something. I'm just like, like, dot 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 dot. Like, I don't know what you want me to say to that, because, like, are you being for real? You're being for real? Like, okay. So the next segment of this video that I want to talk about is going to be about the writing, and how I personally think the main meat and potatoes of this criticism is really just people finding fault with the writing. Okay, this is editing Rachie, but I just wanted to add this part because I didn't say it during the filming. But I wanted to talk about the definition of centrism and just, like, centrist ideology in general, because I feel like there's a disconnect, especially for me, when it comes to this topic, because I personally have always seen centrism, like that ideology, right? Because most people who call themselves centrist, they're moderate in terms of, like, American politics, at least. They are moderate. So I've always kind of seen the ideology, or, like, that kind of political perspective, as essentially right wing, but, like, just not fully leaning into it. Because if we think in terms of the real life political spectrum, right, like, especially if we want to talk in relation to America and just the political landscape right now, the options are basically fascism or not. Like, do you know what I mean? So how can you really be in the middle of that at that point? Like, you are for these people who want to take rights away from, like, all the minorities, or you're, like, not for that. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, how can you be in the middle of that? It just doesn't make sense to me. I just don't see it as, like, a valid, like, stance. Like, it just doesn't make sense, especially the current political landscape right now. It doesn't make sense to me. And I feel like to say or like to put that label on Arcane as well, to me, it doesn't make sense because Arcane is not it's not a right wing show. It's not a right wing show, and centrism is basically a right wing ideology. Like, majority of people who call themselves moderates or like centrist usually vote right wing. They rarely ever vote left wing. Like, and a lot of these people, you ask them their stances on like social issues and things, most of the time they don't even really care. Most of the time they don't even really care. And when it comes to their political opinions, they are way more concerned about things relating to the economy and shit like that. So I'm just like, I just don't personally see how that type of ideology is being mirrored in Arcane. I feel like some people have like a different definition of centrism, but to me, because I'm saying in terms of people who are trying to compare the show, because a lot of people try to put the show on the real life political spectrum or use parallels from the show to real life politics. So if we're talking real life politics and the real life political spectrum right now, I don't see Arcane being on par with like actual centrism that we've got going on like right now. Like, I just don't see it. But yeah, I wanted to add that. Now, I want to make it clear, right, for this segment, I don't have a problem with people who dislike the writing of Arcane. If you don't like the story that the writers chose to tell, that is completely fine. Like, if you genuinely just say, do you know what? I just don't like the narrative for season 2. I just didn't like the story. I didn't like the fact that Victor became a villain. I didn't like the fact that it became about magic and taking down the arcane. That's fine. Like, if that's your opinion, like, that's okay, have that opinion, do you know what I mean? But I feel like these people who also say that the show is centrist, right, it they, like, I feel like they go from, I just have a fault with the writing of season 2, I don't like the story, but they take like the extra mile, and now say, okay, no, it's not just that I don't like the writing, it just didn't, personally, it wasn't for me. It is that the writing is actually centrist when you look into this part and da da da. And I just feel like I'm not one of these people as well who's like against critical thinking or like critically analyzing something, because I'm very much like a critical thinker. Like, when it comes to music, TV shows, movies, things like, I'm very much a critical thinker. Like, I like thinking about things. I don't, I'm just not a passive person, really. But I feel like when it comes to this criticism, right, I feel like part of it is also part of it is people disingenuously framing the writer's intentions and just narrative, I guess. But also, another part of it is really just people who cannot just say that I didn't like the story and move on. And the thing is as well, I don't think that it's completely illogical for you to have this interpretation, right? This ending kind of feels a bit centrist to me. Like, I can get that. But to say that, like, this is a fault with the writers and, they just did the wrong thing, they just did the wrong ending, like, this wasn't the ending that they should have done for the show. I just, like, it's, again, for me, it's just a thing of, were you paying attention? Like, I don't know, because to me, I've said this before, I'm not somebody who watched Arcane and I was extremely displeased coming, like, out of it. Like, I finished the entire show, I was satisfied with the ending, I was happy with how it ended. I wasn't really too mad about anything. Like, the only thing I was really, like, I had reservations about was the fact that everything just felt like it was going so fast. But apart from that, I didn't have like these huge issues that like a lot of people who are very loud about their criticism of the show, I didn't have the same issues. So I was kind of confused when I came into the fandom and I saw people were saying, yeah, the ending, like, it was so centrist, like, it just wasn't leftist enough, like, and the thing is as well with the whole it wasn't leftist enough, I had it like, Arcane, it's not a show that ever puts itself on the real life political spectrum. And the reason why I don't say Arcane is a political show in the way that people think it is because this show, like, and I've actually made a TikTok talking about this. if you disagree with me, you think Arcane is a political show, right? It is like giving commentary on real life politics. What is its message? That's actually my question. What is its message? What is the message that the writers are trying to send about real life politics? Because I feel like if I was to ask that question to this group of people who are very critical of season two or just the show in general, if I was to ask every single one of them, I feel like I would get like 10 different answers. I feel like I would get 10 different answers because it goes from saying that the show is low key right wing. Then it goes, oh, no, actually, it's just in the center. It's trying to play to both sides. And then on another side, people say, well, actually, no, yeah, it's leftist because look at characters like Jinx. She's a revolutionary and did that. Do you know? Like, do you know what I mean? I feel like people. It's like we keep picking and choosing. Which one is it? Which one is it? Is it centrist? Is it low key alt right? Is it leftist? Like, which one is it? Because I just don't feel like it cannot be all these things at the same time, and that's why I say applying like real life politics and like leftism to this show, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because if we talk in terms of real life politics, if we try to make it parallel, like make Arcane parallel to real life politics, it is completely inconsistent. Like like if we were to do that and say, okay, they've got Jinx, she kind of is like a semi-revolutionary, okay, a point for leftist. The ending, well, you know, they kind of join hands and kumbaya, so it's kind of centrist. Then, oh, well, no, we got Caitlyn, who's a police officer or whatever, she's an enforcer, and, you know, Kate, Vi, they were both police, and, you know, so then there's propaganda. So it's actually right wing. Do you get what I mean? It's like there is 1,000 different like criticisms from people who are trying to say that apparently no, this show is actually of this political perspective, and it makes my head hurt because first it was people saying that the show is actually secretly propaganda, right? And Kate Vi is a propaganda couple. Then it's the show is actually centrist because the ending makes them join hands and, you know, forget all their worries. And then it's, oh no, actually it was really leftist in the beginning because, you know, Jinx was the protagonist. Like, which one is it? This is why I keep saying, like, you cannot analyze and view the show through that lens. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You will actually put yourself, like, you will twist yourself into a pretzel trying to do that. It doesn't work. It doesn't work, and that is why this conversation tires me. It actually tires me because where are we going? And the thing is as well, I do not agree with any single one of these interpretations because the show itself does not give any real life political commentary. There is nothing in the show that actually gives any real life commentary on real life politics. Like, and again, I've said this as well because people in the conversation, when people are trying to call Caitlyn fascist, how can she be fascist in a world where democracy doesn't even exist? Doesn't fascism exist in opposition to democracy and shit like that? Like, how can she be a fascist in a world where that doesn't even exist? The politics in which you're trying to impose on this show doesn't even exist in the show. So, like, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? That's just what it feels like to me. It feels like you trying to stick two Lego pieces that don't go together. They don't go together. I don't even know what the original point of what I was trying to talk about in this segment was, but here we are. Like, it's just, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work, and I feel like so many people are trying to make it fit into these boxes when I don't think Arcane wants to be in a box at all. I don't think it wants to be in a box at all. I think the writers just wanted to tell a compelling story. That's it. I don't think there's some like bigger message or whatever, or like political commentary that they're trying to make. I don't think it's there. Like, I don't think it's there. And I don't know, maybe that's an unreasonable take. Someone will tell me in the comment section, I'm a dumb bitch and I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe I am. But that's just how I personally watched it and interpreted it. I don't see what this bigger message or what this underlying like thing that you lot are trying to find. It's like you guys are trying to find this smoking gun. There's nothing there. Like, there's no smoking gun. It isn't there. Like
Don't laugh. You can't laugh.
I like, it's just weird, and I feel like every single one of these criticisms is like someone coming with like, hey, I got a smoking gun, I got the smoking gun, and it's like, no, like that's a toy gun actually, like it's a toy gun, it's not. Like, there's no smoking gun. There isn't. And I just feel like, I don't know, I'm getting bored of like some of these types of criticisms. But back to the conversation about the writing and people not liking the writing. I think a lot of people as well, they just like, you just don't like the way the narrative went. You don't like the fact that, Victor became a villain and all of that, and they all fought to get rid of the Arcane. That is fine. If you didn't like that, that's fine. But I feel like trying to frame that as centrism, I don't know, it like, to me it was just the writers trying to build climax. I don't know, that was really what that was to me. It was just climax. I don't know, I just feel like it's just storytelling. It's just storytelling. And I feel like if you want to interpret that way, sure, but I'm going to go with the personal opinion that I don't think the writers wanted people to interpret it that way. And I guess to that you could say, well, then maybe they should have made it clear and less ambiguous. Sure, I could agree with that. But I just personally don't think that that's what they wanted your takeaway to be, that this is, they're trying to basically sell centrism and say, well, Zorn was basically able to get over it and, forgive Piltover, and, they can just work together and live alongside each other in harmony. Like, that is not what happened. Like, even at the ending, right, Sevika is added to the council. Like I said this in the last video as well, the last scene to me with Caitlyn and Vi, and Caitlyn like saying, are you still in this fight? I've always interpreted it as there's still more work to be done. This issue of classism, right, that exists in their universe, it's not just gonna be gone because, they were able to defeat this villain, and, they were able to finally listen to each other, I guess, or, Piltover was finally able to give Zorn a voice or listen to them. Like, do you know what I mean? There's still work to be done. Like, they still need to both rebuild the cities. And this was actually part of the back and forth that I had with this person on my TikTok. At the end, right, it's heavily implied like both cities still like need work to be like rebuilt, right? Because both of them are still very much like in ruin because of what happened. So I personally interpreted that as them rebuilding Zorn would also include them like doing some sort of reform, right? Like them basically trying to fix the problems that existed before, giving them clean air. Like them just not being neglected anymore the way they were before. So I feel like to even say, well, they added the Savika to the council, so, still the same corrupt system. Well, no. Well, no, because they don't have like ignorant Piltovans who don't care about Zorn on the council anymore. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, the change in which that people I guess are looking for is literally like in progress. Like, it's happening. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not the same system that it is anymore. If it was the same system, then they wouldn't change anything about the council. The Zorn would probably still continue to be neglected the same way it was, and everything would just go back to how it was before, and maybe they would do like a slight little change, whatever. No, they're actually trying to change things. Like, do you know what I mean? That's just personally how I interpreted it. Because I know some people are like, well, having Savika work on the council under like this same system that was oppressing her before, it's like this centrist idea of working under the system to like make these small changes can fix things. But it's like, first off, again, you saying that, I feel like that is you also running with the assumption that I don't know, they're not making a big changes or whatever, or they're like not doing that type of work, because we don't see it at the end of the show. So it's like your assumption of whatever of how it's gonna go is like as equally predictable as mine. Like me interpreting and saying, okay, well maybe they actually will make some like bigger changes and things will really change. Like there's the same probability that, oh well actually, it's just gonna be the same shit, and they'll still be oppressed because she's under this same oligarchy and whatever. It's becoming far removed from the show. We're not actually discussing the show and its contents anymore. Now we're talking about your headcanons. We're talking about your headcanons. Oh yes. Also, another thing that I wanted to say in relation to this like segment or whatever is that to the people who are like, okay, well, you know, they could have done a different type of ending, whatever. I feel like if you have that type of opinion, I genuinely want to know, like, if you want to comment it down below, comment it down below. I would genuinely like to hear, like, what would have been the ending that you feel like would have logically made sense and matched the continuity of season 2. Because I feel like a lot of people who say, okay, the ending was too centrist for me, like, it should have been different, whatever. I feel like now you want a different Arcane. Like now you want a different Arcane, you want a different show because that's not the story they're trying to tell. And that's why I keep saying I don't think people have understood yet. Like, they're just not trying to tell that story. They're not trying to tell the story that you want. Like, this is their show. Like, you have to remember that. This is their show. This is the story they wanted to tell, right? So, that's why I'm like, for me personally, when it comes to my criticisms and just discussing Arcane, I have always done it through the lens of remembering this is their story and this is the story they wanted to tell, right? So I can only critique or talk about the show within the confines of that. But I feel like so many people have started conversation or critique that is with outside of the confines of like the story that they actually wanted to tell. And again, I've said this before, you don't have to like the story that they wanted to tell. If the story that they wanted to tell feels too centrist to you, that's fine. But I just personally feel like trying to paint it as no, actually the writers made the wrong choice, and you know this was a much better suited narrative. Well, that actually doesn't match the story that they wanted to tell. Like, I don't know, the people, because I feel like there are some people who have this opinion. They're like, oh, well, you know, it should have ended like Piltover just completely fallen and, you know, Zorn would have complete independence and da da da. That ending, I don't feel like it would have matched the type of story that they want to tell. And also another thing to keep in mind, you guys have to remember, yeah, I've said this show is based upon pre-existing lore for a game that has existed for years. And in said game, Zona and Piltover are still at odds. Like they're not that conflict has not been resolved. Like they still don't mess with each other, they don't like each other. So to logically think that in Arcane they would have solved that, again, this is what I'm saying now. Now you want a different show. This isn't like that's not the show anymore. Now this is a different show. What you're asking for would be a different show, basically. Because that's not the story they were trying to tell. And that's the thing. I personally liked the story that they wanted to tell. Other people didn't, and that's fine. But I don't and I cannot with people who basically your criticism is you not wanting to admit this story just wasn't for me, and you actually trying to say, well, no, this actually wasn't the story that the writers wanted to tell. They just made the wrong choice and they needed to do it this way. Like, no, like, no. Sorry, no. Now you're trying to write a different show. Like, I don't know. Like, maybe you need to go, like, write some fan fiction or something and give yourself the fantastical ending you wanted. Your ending or whatever, which one you would have wanted would have been a different show. It would have been a different show. It would have been a different show and a different story, and it wouldn't have matched the story that they had been telling since season 1. That's just my personal opinion. Okay, so for the last part, I guess like last little segment of this video, because I mean I feel like the last segment was basically the meat and potatoes of this video. But for this last segment, I just want to talk about Arcane and its message just in general that it was trying to show throughout the show. Because I think Arcane just shows you a good example of how all the conflict that happens in the show and between its characters, how there's not a simple solution to all of this stuff. I think a lot of people in their heads wanted a simple solution to a show which never really introduced simple ideas and black and white thinking. And I think for a lot of people, it irritates them the fact that Arcane doesn't put itself like in a certain place or in a certain box, that it really is a show that relies, well, not fully, but it does, part of it does rely on your ability to just be able to like be literate with the content that is in the show, right? For you to be able to understand this is the narrative, this is what they are, what this is trying to represent, what they're trying to tell you, what they're trying to show you. And I just think that it's a very interesting conversation, and it's very strange to me because I feel like it's in a way like trying to say that Arcane just isn't it's not a very it's not a very nuanced show, which is just something that I don't agree with at all. I just don't agree with it at all. I just think that personally, ambiguity doesn't always mean centrism. And I think because of the fact that the ending is ambiguous, a lot of people just interpret it as, well, they didn't clear cut tell us that, they're fixing shit and that, Zorn is going to be good now and that Piltover has learned their lesson, or that these people didn't get punished, and we didn't see Caitlyn get beat and whatever. They think that that is trying to tell them, that's the writers trying to convey their message. Yeah, this is what we personally think, and this is what we're trying to say. We're trying to say that, yeah, we believe staying in the middle. Like, I just don't think that that's what is trying to be told here. Like, I don't know. And this is not like a foreign concept in media that has been done before. Like, this idea of leaving things up to interpretation when it comes to endings, when it comes to certain parts of narrative. Not everything is always going to be shown on camera or is going to be told to you. Sometimes you just have to sometimes you just have to use some literacy. You have to use some literacy, and I feel like a lot of people don't want to use that literacy. They want the writers to tell them every damn thing. And I feel like personally, in terms of the nuance and the type of writing that Arcane has, I think that ambiguity in the ending was the best option. That's just my personal opinion. I don't feel like a clear cut ending of them, ending the class conflict or whatever. I just don't feel like it would have matched the writing that they had all this season. I don't know. That's my personal opinion, yeah. And you can disagree with that. It's fine. Everyone, you can have your opinion. It's fine. This video is just me giving my personal thoughts on it, and I guess giving a breakdown of what I personally think about this conversation. But I just think that a lot of people come across as disgruntled because the show didn't go in the way that they thought it would. And because of that, they have to try and find this big fault or huge fault with the writers, and trying to say that the show's politics are just like garbage or something. And I just don't think that that's the case. I think that a lot of people cannot handle nuanced characters and a multifaceted plot. That is why we have people in this fandom who think that showing characters like Marcus's POV is, trying to push the idea that, the enforcers, they also have valid points and da and all this stuff, and, they're correct. I just feel like certain parts of the narrative, you should just be able to tell what is right and wrong. Like, them showing Caitlyn's perspective when she was going through her dictator era or whatever, that is not the show trying to tell you you should agree with what she's doing. And I feel like a lot of people just in general, that is like that is just their mentality. They think that showing these perspectives, right, or just not outwardly saying something in your writing is you basically just placing yourself in the center. And I don't think that's what it is. I don't think that's what it is. And I'd actually argue that in terms of this conversation of how Arcane wants to present its morals, right? Not its politics, its morals. It's very clear cut actually. Like, viewing Arcane through this type of political lens, it just doesn't work, and to me it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, and it actually sucks all the fun out of the show. I'll be honest. It doesn't make it enjoyable to think about whether, this is, you can say that certain narratives and whatever and like storylines weren't your favorite, but to say that like they had like some sort of ulterior motive or something, or they were trying to like say something else, there's like some underlying message, like, trying to portray that, oh, I have this smoking gun, and that there's no gun or smoke. Like, I just, that's just how it feels to me. This conversation, like this critique, To one, it just feels weak to me, and it also just feels like a nothing burger. Like, it feels like a nothing burger because I said this in my last video, but even if I wanted to entertain that talking point, I say, yeah, okay, because it's ambiguous, because it doesn't say which point of the spectrum it's on, is centrist. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does it mean for me to say that, yeah, this show is centrist? Like, what does it mean in a show that doesn't have real life political properties for me to say that, yeah, if we put it on the real life spectrum, it's centrist? What does that mean? What does that mean? And I'm not even saying that as like a joke or funny thing. Like, genuinely, I want to know, what does that mean? What does that mean? Does that mean like it's a bad thing? Does that mean we should be upset? It's just a very redundant take and a very redundant conversation. That is basically all my thoughts on this conversation. I hope you lot enjoyed hearing my thoughts and whatever, and you lot can tell me what you think down below, whether you agree with me, whether you think I'm talking shit, whether you think I'm, I don't know nothing. This video, I didn't even have any notes or anything. It was literally just me speaking off the top of my dome. I just felt like I really wanted to film this video today because I had quite a few thoughts in my head. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and as I said before, if you have any other video ideas for me, you want to see any other content from me, comment down below, let me know. Follow me on my other platforms as well. You can follow me on my TikTok. I post daily, and yeah, I think that's it. Like the video if you like the video too, and subscribe if you're new, turn on post notifications, and yeah, I will see you guys for my next video next week. Bye.